My name is Steve Jungkeit, and I'm the senior minister of the First Congregational Church of Old Lyme, and I am also a resident of Old Lyme. In addition to being a minister, I help to lead the Old Saybrook March for Justice, as well as the Old Lyme Partnership for Social Justice, working to bring racial equity to towns along the Connecticut shoreline. I didn't get a chance to speak in favor of SB 1024 when public testimony was being taken, but I wish to do so now. And I wish to do so from my perspective as a minister. Here's the first reason we need this reform in communities like the one I live in. I've worked very hard to bring refugees to our town, a process that began during the Syrian crisis of 2014. While our committee imagined that Old Lyme was a welcoming and hospitable place, an impediment to our efforts to relocate and resettle refugees was and is the ability to locate housing for our refugee families. Our church wound up purchasing a home in which we could invite refugee families to live for a year while searching for permanent housing, but those families have had to relocate outside of our community after their residence here because adequate housing simply was not available. We can't, in other words, be the welcoming place that we wish to be because the housing we need isn't here. This bill, I believe, can help to change that. My second reason for supporting the bill has to do with racial and economic diversity in smaller communities such as ours. Like many cities and small towns this past summer, Lyme and Old Saybrook held marches where we insisted that the lives of Black and Brown people mattered to us. And yet it wasn't lost on more than a few observers, including us as leaders, that even as we said that Black lives were important to us, there were very few people of color in our midst. There is a long and painful history behind that fact. Quite recently, a few members of my community organized to kill a 37-unit affordable housing project in Old Lyme. It was an embarrassing moment in our town's history. But that's why this bill matters so much. It could help move not only Old Lyme and Old Saybrook, but the entire state of Connecticut past that shameful blockage of affordable housing. It would help to provide housing for those who work in our stores and provide the services that we depend upon in towns like this. But it would also include many other people as well, including those who would simply like to access some of the resources in smaller communities like the ones along the shoreline. In essence, this bill would help to alleviate the disconnect that occurs when towns such as ours affirm racial justice while simultaneously living within a zone that is highly segregated. But my third and final reason for supporting this bill emerges from my religious convictions. I simply believe it's morally right to do so. Conversely, I believe it's morally wrong to keep in place laws and restrictions that have an exclusionary effect upon so many. I know data often drives these arguments, but I believe a moral vision should drive them too. To put it very bluntly, zoning restrictions in Connecticut have worked to create a de facto form of apartheid. There are no walls, there are no gates, there are no border checks. But when I drive from Hartford or New London or New Haven back to Old Lyme, I may as well have passed through a separation wall where economic, educational, environmental, and other such resources are apportioned only to the fortunate few. That form of apartheid means that wealthy communities wind up hoarding their resources. To draw on the language of religion, I believe that's a sin. Addressing zoning restrictions will go a long way toward reducing that form of wealth and resource hoarding that occurs throughout Connecticut, but also sadly in places like Old Saybrook and Old Lyme, where I live. Connecticut, we have learned, is one of the more segregated states in the country, despite its image as a tolerant and hospitable place in which to live. I want to affirm that it is that sometimes, but it could be like that so much more of the time if we work to create the kind of housing opportunities that this bill would help to allow. Thank you.